Thanks for joining me, Madam Horror, for your bedtime scary stories. If you have a story you would like read on this channel, send it to me at madamhorror1@gmail.com. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, and we'll dive deeper into the unknown. More than a decade ago, on one of the hottest nights of the year, I was taking my kids down to the 7-Eleven near our apartment block to grab some big gulps. Just as we were walking past a public park right near a tree line, this completely normal, well-dressed looking couple emerged from the trees and started walking right towards us. I actually couldn't believe it when the guy suddenly told me to give him my wallet and anything else in my pockets. I mean, I really thought it was like a dumb joke of some kind. They looked so well dressed that they should have been in the office working or something. I actually let out this nervous laughter, then asked if they were serious. The guy answered my question by pulling out what looked like a fishing knife from his jacket pocket when he opened it and pointed it at me. I shoved my daughter behind me to protect her the best I could. Then, just as I was going to do the same for my son, the woman grabbed his other arm and began pulling him towards her. I honestly felt like my heart was about to explode with fear. There's no other way of describing it. I suddenly just lost all sense of self-preservation as I leapt forward to attack this well-to-do looking woman who just grabbed my son. The next thing I knew, I felt what I could only describe as a cold punch under the ribs from my left side. I looked down to see the guy had buried his fishing knife into my stomach. What came next felt like a little bit of divine intervention. Honestly, two joggers had spotted what was going on and came over to intervene. This scared off at least one of the unassuming muggers. As I turned to check on my kids, though, I felt my legs fall out from underneath me and I hit the ground hard. I remember hearing someone screaming and thinking it was my daughter. When I looked, the woman who had grabbed my son was on the ground, though, crying and wailing with blood pouring from her mouth. Honestly, I didn't remember hitting her, but she seemed pretty adamant that I did. She was actually going to try and make it out like she was the victim of this whole situation, maybe trying to avoid getting arrested when the cops finally showed up. The police that patrolled this park showed up not long after. The cops actually started asking the woman what happened, like if we were a couple or something. My kids had to tell them that she was the partner of the guy that had stabbed me. This definitely threw the joggers off too, because they must have assumed that that was the case as well. The whole time I just kept on begging someone to call the ambulance. I was pretty sure I was bleeding to death. I got taken to the hospital, and to my complete disbelief, I was questioned about the whole thing as though I was a suspect. I had no idea what this was about until a while after. It looked more and more likely I was going to be charged with battery for the woman, since it turned out she was actually from a decently well-off family and gotten into some vicious cycle of addiction with some trust fund junkie she'd met in her city. Her family actually tried to sue me when the charges didn't stick, but it was thrown out, and she was sentenced for attempted kidnapping not long after. As for me, I had a tube in my chest for 2 weeks after surgery to remove the knife, but thankfully I made a full recovery. Honestly, when I look back on it, I'm just glad my kids didn't get hurt in any way, and I still run through all the horrific scenarios in my head where we didn't walk away from that situation relatively unscathed. I used to work at a 7-Eleven gas station here in the United States, and the scariest thing that ever happened to me there was also the single most terrifying thing that's ever happened in my entire life. It happened on a particularly quiet night. I was still kind of hungover from going out drinking the night before. Because of that, I wasn't even really paying attention when this one guy entered the store. I heard the door sliding open. I vaguely heard his footsteps as he walked up to the counter. And then, right as I was about to lift my head up and ask the man what he wanted, he slammed something down on the counter in front of me. I remember the very first thing I noticed being the sudden red splatter on my t-shirt, which was plain white. The moment his hand impacted the counter, all these little red specks appeared on my shirt. I already recoiled from the shock of having his hand slammed down in front of me, but when I saw what he just slammed down next to the register, I recoiled even further. It was a tongue, like an actual tongue. Even though it was soaked in red, I could recognize the deep ridge running down the middle of it. It sounds like such a cliche when I think about it now, but now I understand what people mean when they say they were frozen in fear. The whole thing was an assault on my senses. The look in the guy's eyes as he stared at me was so calm but intense. His eyes were so wide and unblinking. It was like he didn't have eyelids at all. It was only when he spoke that I actually found the will to move. All he said to me was, "Call 911." I bolted into the back office, locked the door behind me, and immediately called the cops. All the while, I watched the guy on the cameras just standing there at the register. He didn't move at all. He seemed to be looking down, staring at the mess he just left on my counter. Given the gruesome nature of my emergency, there was a police patrol car and 2 cops pulling up outside in just a matter of moments. When they moved to arrest him, he just held his wrists and allowed them to put the handcuffs on him, then let the cops take him away. Once he was safely out of the store, I walked out of the office, trying not to look at what was still on the counter. Then I told the cops everything that happened. Obviously, it wasn't all that much, but as I was talking to them, I noticed more and more police surrounding a car in the parking lot that still had the door open. I went home to decompress. From what I heard, after the guy had gotten into an argument with his wife while driving somewhere, at some point, he just kind of snapped, pulled up into a parking lot, stabbed her to death, and then removed her tongue. For some reason, he picked our 7-Eleven to walk into to slam the tongue he just cut out of her mouth down onto the countertop. As you might imagine, I was allowed to take a little bit of time off of work after that whole thing. Even when I did go back, I was on edge the whole time. For my first couple of shifts, I couldn't seem to shake the image of that bloody tongue lying on the countertop in front of me. The thing I can't seem to shake either is that it wasn't enough for the guy to just stab and kill his own wife. He had to reach into her mouth afterwards and cut out her tongue. What could possibly possess someone to do something so horrifying to someone they love? The guy didn't look like a monster either. All that gave away his distressed mental state was that crazy look in his eyes, the one that had me frozen in fear. I used to work at a 7-Eleven that was right next to an art school campus. In addition to all the snacks and drinks, we had a little stationery section and kept some stuff behind the counter, too. One of the things we kept behind the counter were scissors. the kind that are sealed in plastic casing. So one day, this customer walks up to the counter with a Gatorade and asks if he can have a pair of scissors, too. Of course, I grabbed a pair for him. I scanned them and told him the price of both the items. Instead of getting out his wallet, though, he immediately started removing the plastic packaging from the scissors. I didn't think it too suspicious at first. I mean, I figured he needed them for some kind of minor emergency or something, and that he'd pay for them after cutting whatever it was that needed to be cut. Instead, once they were out of the packaging, he gripped the handle like they were a knife or something and looked me right in the eyes. "I could just kill you with these right now, you know that?" I was so stunned, I didn't know what to say. I know he must have enjoyed the fearful look on my face because of the way he started smiling. All I could do was reach for my phone in my pocket and start to dial 911. I had no real way of defending myself, and I was hoping the cops would arrive before he actually did anything. Just as I tapped the numbers out, I looked up to see him walking away from the counter, laughing to himself as he walked out of the store. I stayed on the line with 911 for a while, shaking as I told them what just happened. The cops showed up a little while later, and they took their time. Since it wasn't an ongoing situation, an officer reviewed the security camera footage. It turns out the guy had been doing the same thing all over town and picking out girls working retail on their own before shoplifting random items like that. He did the same thing every time, too. He would always get away with it by telling the girl he could kill them with whatever it was he was stealing, be it a knife or scissors or hedge clippers. He never actually hurt someone, yet. But the cops were extra focused on getting him in cuffs because it felt like it was only a matter of time before he actually crossed the line and did hurt someone. Even though he took his time to show up, the cop was really helpful and reassuring. He gave me his cell number to call him directly the next time the man walked into the store. I mean, it must have been pretty serious because the guy actually had a real detective assigned to his case. Although I didn't hear about it afterwards, I sincerely hope the guy never crossed that line and actually hurt a girl with any of the items he ended up stealing. I worked at a 7-Eleven gas station part-time in between classes earlier this year. We got a little rush of customers in the early afternoon. One time, I served 2 guys for coffee and smokes, and at the back of the line there was this tiny kid, no older than maybe 11 or 12, just waiting there patiently with a backpack in his hand. Honestly, I thought he looked kind of cute, like a little gentleman doing some grocery shopping for his mom. When he got to the front of the line, I asked him, "What can I help you with, sir?" in kind of a joking, playful way. Without a hint of emotion on his face, he reached into his backpack and suddenly pulled out a gun. "Give me all the money." When he pointed it at me, I wasn't sure if it was real or not. What? Where the hell would a 12-year-old kid get their hands on a loaded gun like that? It's not like the 7-Eleven I worked at is high in crime either. It's actually located in a pretty nice place. And although I've heard 1 or 2 stories from coworkers about some trouble at the store, nothing had ever happened like this. There was one other guy in the store at the time. I looked over at him to see him kind of smiling at the kid, smiling and frowning like he was amused but disappointed of this kid playing a dumb, childish prank. I don't know about guns, but I figured this guy must have, so I tried calling the kid's bluff. "You shouldn't point toys like that, sweetheart. Cops might think it's real or something." The kid then responded by cocking the gun. There was a real metallic sound that sent a shock of fear running through me. I knew no toy guns made that kind of sound. As if to illustrate he wasn't joking around, the kid pointed the gun in the air and fired a shot that went right past my head. After my ears got done ringing and I came to, I heard once again, "Give me all the money," in the same monotone, emotionless way. I didn't hesitate in doing what he asked. I put as much cash as I could onto the countertop, then watched him fill his backpack with it before he walked out of the store. I think the thing that scared me so much about this, though, was that the kid didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. He definitely seemed like he had something missing about him, like he didn't understand he could have actually killed someone over what dumb thing he wanted to buy with that money, be it a video game or candy or whatever. At least a grown-up armed robber understands a gun as a means of getting what they want, and it's not a good idea to just fire it whenever, just in case they accidentally shoot someone in the face. I get the feeling, though, that if I'd even tried to resist or tell the kid no at all, he'd just shoot me in the face, because it's what he assumed he should do. It's almost surreal to me now. The closest I've ever come to death is at the hands of a small child, someone who should have been so innocent and carefree and full of love. Instead, felt nothing. I hope you enjoyed tonight's scary stories. If you did, remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you have a story that you would like read on this channel, please send it to me at madamhorror1@gmail.com. Join me next time for more tales of the unknown.